Men. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about men. Well, men and women. Old men and women, actually. Not like nursing home old, but ancient men and women of the old days. A particular type of men and women. In fact, they are the ancestors of many men and women on Tamriel. We are talking about the Nedes, the Nedic people, phrases you may have heard from time to time while playing the Elder Scrolls games or reading books about the lore, but perhaps you never got to understand the full context of what the Nedes actually are. Well, welcome to FudgeMuppet, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Scott, and today I'm here to tell you all about these men and women of old, the Ancient Nedes of Tamriel. So firstly, where are these Nedes from? I mean, everyone has to come from somewhere, and this is a hotly debated topic amongst many scholars of Tamriel, and unfortunately, there is no one single clear answer. Whether they have always been on Tamriel or came from some far-off land, we will never know for sure. However, the generally accepted and most popular theory is that the Nedes were groups of humans that migrated from Atmora in waves throughout ancient periods of unrecorded time, well before the final migration, which involved the Nords settling in Skyrim. The theory is that these first humans came to Skyrim and spread all over Tamriel, particularly areas like High Rock, Hammerfell, and Cyrodiil. But if you go check out our Who Are the Elnafey video, which we made a few weeks ago, which I will also link in the description, you could also come to the conclusion that they were simply descendants of the wandering Elnafey who settled in Tamriel. Some scholars, such as Hasfat and Tobolus, says that others claim the out of Atmora theory is only popular because it reinforces the Nordic fatherland patriotism of the Septim Empire, rather than being well supported by archaeological evidence. Either way, all you need to know is that Nedes are humans who were in Tamriel for a long time, long enough to be considered native. You know what? It's probably best to mention right now that Nedes aren't as strict a classification as Nord, Colovian, Nibonese, or Breton is today. Nedes seem to refer to various groups of mannish cultures and tribes who would unite and mix into larger cultures and become more distinguished over time. As far as we know, the Nedes as an ethnicity and culture had seemed to die out by the time of the 9th century in the First Era, having either been assimilated and transformed into a new group identity or completely annihilated by an invading force. So let's get through some examples of Nedic cultures and peoples, starting with one that everyone should be very familiar with, the Nedes of Cyrodiil, and of course, the most famous Nedic individual to ever exist on Tamriel, Queen Alicia, or rather Saint Alicia now, the slave queen, the founder of the First Empire. So way back in the First Era, many of the Nedic tribes of Cyrodiil had been enslaved by the Aelid elves. The Nedes, when free from oppression, had worshipped mainly Shazar, the divine being known as Lorcan and Shor by other cultures, the spirit behind all human undertaking. But the Aelids did not like the idea of Shazar being worshipped by their slaves, so they would try to phase his worship out amongst their Nedic slaves. Most Nedes who were born as slaves under the elven fist of the Aelids grew up worshipping the Imperial Pantheon. It was all they knew. It wasn't until Saint Alicia rose up and began a rebellion that would tear down the Aelid regime that the Nedes would be free again. With the help of champions like Pelennor Whitestrake and Morahouse the Manbull, along with the Nords of Skyrim, the Nedes would win the war for Cyrodiil and be free of slavery. Interestingly enough, this is where the birth of the Imperial Pantheon comes from, the 8 divines. You see, the Nords had their own pantheon, and the Nedes worshipped the Aldmeri Pantheon with beings like Auriel and other elven gods that would not go down well with the Nords, their new allies. So Alicia consolidated the two pantheons into one, with beings like Akatosh and Kinnereth, combinations of both pantheons. This starts the beginning of Imperial culture, and this is the starting point for Nedic disappearance in terms of culture and ethnicity, but Nedic blood still runs through the veins of Imperials and almost every man today to some degree. But after the Nords interbred with the Nedes and their culture shifted, they became different peoples, unlike the Nedes of other areas that remained ethnically and culturally Nedic. The Nedes of Cyrodiil had been enslaved by the Aelids for a long while, which would have already wiped out much of their culture, and the same goes for the enslaved Nedes of High Rock. The Bretons of High Rock that you know today are the result of interbreeding between the Dureni elves and their Nedic slaves, with a bit of Nord mixed in too. eventually resulting in the bastard race of Manmer, the Bretons. But being enslaved for so long and over multi-generational interbreeding, the features that would have been considered intrinsically Nedic both ethnically and culturally would have faded. But there were some Nedic groups that managed to outlast and resist Elven occupation or invasion, those who managed to remain ethnically and culturally Nedic. One of the best examples of this is the Nedes of the Deathlands. These Deathlands are what you would know as Hammerfell today, a sun-baked region where the Nedes thrived. They faced many challenges here, invasions by Aelid elves, Dwemer, and even orcs, including the native stone-worshipping Iron Orcs. Skilled in both metallurgy and masonry, the Nedes here made some great cities and structures of stone, bustling with life and Nedic culture. This was the peak of the Nedes, a group that managed to resist Elven influence and oppression. This would be an example of what other Nedic cultures could have been had they not been enslaved or wiped out. Nedic religion involved worship of the stars, having particular reverence for constellations and their aspects. In fact, powerful godlike mortals called celestials that fell from the stars were also revered and worshipped. But unfortunately, this Nedic culture would come to an end when the Yakutan invasion of the Regatta came along in the 9th century of the First Era. The Yakutans would end up cleaning Hammerfell of anyone and everyone in a brutal slaughter, making way for Redguard civilization. But where else did the Nedes exist before their demise and fading? Well, there were Nedes in places like Skyrim, but not much is known about them. It's said they were far more primitive than the other Nedes. But they also got a decent foothold in Morrowind for a while, until the Chimer, the precursor race of the Dunmer, kicked them out and erased them from Morrowind in some gruesome wars. Interestingly enough, also Blackmarsh was home to some human tribes of Nedic origin, particularly the Kothringi, who are people of note, which while not culturally synonymous with the Nedic people, it is believed they came from the same roots. The Kothringi were humans with metallic skin and reflective faces who inhabited the areas of Blackmarsh, traditionally moving around completely naked in their stone villages with thatch roofs. They also experienced Aelid slavery and oppression. So ultimately, what happened to the Nedes? Well, they were integrated or annihilated in most regions, but their legacy lives on. Nedic culture had a substantial impact on Redguard customs and culture, but most notably their legacy is one with the Imperial people, particularly the Nibonese. The Nibonese region of Cyrodiil is the fertile valley that encompasses areas like Breville and Leyawan, and it is here that Nedic culture had survived the most. It is the Nibonese people who are the most ethnically and culturally related to the Nedes of ancient eras past, but even so, it is fading with every era, because that is the nature of culture. It changes and forms anew with every new generation, war, decade, and conflict. Things change, and the time of the Nedes ended long ago. Makes you think sometimes. Who's next? Perhaps it is the culture of man if the Thalmor were ever successful. Perhaps the Akaviri could come over for another invasion and decimate Tamrielic culture. I guess we won't know until an Elder Scrolls 6, but I would expect more than likely you will see some familiar faces in cultures in that game. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, all about the Nedes. I hope you learned something new and you have a better understanding of who the Nedic people actually are. So now that when you hear it mentioned in a game, you will know what those NPCs are talking about. Like the video if you've enjoyed it, and feel free to ask questions that you would like answered in video form down in the comments below. Social media links are in the description, as well as a link to the Wandering Elnafe video, which is interesting. Thanks so much for watching, guys. My name's Scott, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.